Awesome. So thanks everybody for tuning in. You are joining me here for Newcomer Engagement and Inclusivity. We are still having technical difficulties. One moment, there we go. So we are going to be taking the next hour to talk about this, and we have Malvina Rapko here. So tonight I'm just going to do a brief introduction. We have some people who may not be familiar with Saskatchewan soccer, so I'll do a brief introduction there. I will introduce Malvina. She will then expand on herself and her skill sets, and then I will tell you a little bit about what Saskatchewan soccer is doing in this area, and then we will end with some questions. So Saskatchewan soccer is the provincial sport governing body in Saskatchewan. Of course, there are provincial sport governing bodies in every province and for almost every sport. We have over 65 member organizations around the province, from the east to the west, the very north to the very south. And we offer soccer, futsal, which is the official indoor sport, beach soccer, which is something new to our province that we're very excited about, and walking soccer, which is a adapted version of the game for older adults to children, teens, adults, and seniors. We have a robust strategic plan, which we are in the middle of and have just extended for one more year, that focuses on the priorities of players, coaches, referees, our organization as a whole, SSA, our membership, and our community. And of course, the community portion is where newcomer engagement comes in. So I'm excited to introduce Malvina Rapko, who is the owner of Cultural Bridges, Inc. It's a Saskatoon-based organization with the goals of building connections between cultures and contributing to the creation of a more global understanding of the world we live in. So Malvina immigrated to Canada in the early 80s and has lived in Saskatoon ever since. She considers herself a cultural sponge who spends her time with her family, her friends, and her ever-growing community. When she's not in Saskatoon, she can be found expanding her reach across Canada and beyond over and over again. She joins us today as a cultural intelligence facilitator and the founder of Cultural Bridges, Inc., a social enterprise that specializes in teaching people how to successfully engage interculturally. So Malvina and I met actually at a networking event last year, and when we met and got talking, I knew that she would be perfect to help us in this area. So welcome, Malvina.
Okay. All right, there we go. Thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Can everyone hear me?
You bet we can.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
okay, good. Okay. Fantastic. I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining me today, and for Saskatchewan Soccer for inviting me to speak. I see that we have one extra special guest, Cristiano Ronaldo is joining us today. So that's pretty exciting. Okay, so without further ado, I will just share my screen. Okay, so we're here today to talk about how to engage newcomers through sport, so specifically soccer. So we'll talk about a few ideas of how to do so, and sort of some background to understand how to make this process successful. Okay, so I'll just give you another quick background on me. So I am the founder of Cultural Bridges, and I graduated from the University of Saskatchewan with a degree in international studies. And I became recently, a few years ago actually, certified in cultural intelligence. So I became a facilitator, which is something that's not very common in Canada. The company was started in the United States and became more known globally, and is just expanding into Canada. But it was a way of thought that I really connected with, and decided to pursue. Cultural intelligence is something that I find is an important way to live life especially when you're engaging in a multicultural setting. And I have experience working with the newcomers and primary and secondary students and international students as well. And just a few things that I enjoy doing, spending time with friends and family, traveling, and increasing my cultural intelligence. Okay, so what is cultural intelligence? So cultural intelligence is something that was developed by Dr. David Livermore, and he is a social scientist, and he has spent his time devoted to the topics of cultural intelligence and global leadership. And he's the author of many books, which I recommend a little later on. And what I try and do is take a cultural intelligent approach to my presentations. This is why we're beginning with this, just giving you a little bit of a background as to what cultural intelligence is about and how it can be applied in this situation. Okay, so what does it mean? What's the definition here? So cultural intelligence is the capability to function and relate effectively in culturally diverse settings. Okay, so the Cultural Intelligence Center has done extensive research on cultural intelligence, obviously. So according to their research, they found that the most culturally intelligent individuals have developed skills in 4 capabilities. So cultural intelligence is a measurement, it's an assessment model. And the 4 capabilities are as follows. There's the CQ drive, which is your level of interest, persistence, confidence, and during multicultural interactions. Then there's CQ knowledge, so what you know about cultures. CQ action, your ability to adapt when relating and working with people from different cultural backgrounds. And CQ strategy. And so your ability to plan for multicultural interactions. And the cultural intelligence belief is that you can't do one without the other. These 4 capabilities work together and have to, in order to be most successful. So cultural intelligence goes beyond cultural sensitivity and competency. It identifies the abilities of individuals who successfully and sustainably maintain intercultural relationships in various settings. So this presentation will include just a snapshot of what cultural intelligence is about. And there is a lot more to this topic. So if anyone is interested, please let me know. I look forward to hearing from you post presentation or have questions later. Okay. Oops, sorry, just having a little difficulty here. Okay, so the strategy put forth is a setup and a way to inspire change and to further curiosity. So the best way I learn personally is through simple methods. So I believe that the foundation to successful intercultural engagement is by approaching a complex issue with a simplistic method that does not simplify the situation. So basically acknowledging that the situation is complex, but there are simple ways to understand and to work within the situation. So with that said, let's talk about psychology, which I know is a complex issue, but really I'm going to keep things simple here. So Maslow figured out that all humans share the same basic needs. And the reason why this is important right now is because often when we're talking about intercultural situations, engagement, people get nervous, and they worry about saying the wrong things. They worry about how they're going to be perceived, if the information they're presenting is understood. And really, we have to just take it all back and go to what really connects all of us. And it's that we're all humans that have the same basic needs. And newcomers are just like that too. Same basic needs, all humans. And that, I feel, really helps when I work in intercultural situations, just kind of going back to the basics. So we all need to feel secure. We all need a sense of community, and we all need to feel respected. So our focus today will be on 3 of Maslow's needs, on safety, so creating social stability, belonging, so interpersonal relationships, and creating a sense of respect, so esteem. Okay, so how important is soccer in all of this? Well, it's the people sport. So soccer, football, it's for the people. So why is it a great way for people to come together? According to numerous sources, soccer is the most played sport in the world. So apparently about 4 million people around the, or 4 billion people around the world play soccer. That is a huge, huge number. The other sports that come after this are not even sports that are well known globally. So this is pretty impressive with how many people come together over this one single sport. So also, and a few other statistics, according to a cross-country study done in Canada, where over 100,000 new Canadians were interviewed, they found out that 80% of adults interviewed said that soccer was their favorite sport. So this was, they were asked about before coming to Canada and since coming to Canada, and soccer still remained the favorite. And then about 50% of the people who were interviewed had children, and they were asked what sports their kids play, and swimming was the first and soccer came in second. And again, you can see these are high percentages. So so why is that? Is it because it's the beautiful game and people are attracted to beauty? Perhaps, but perhaps it's more that about soccer being an accessible game. Universally accessible. It can be played by most people and on most surfaces, and is universally recognized as a game that people, for the most part, understand how to play. There are absolutely there are complexities to soccer, but for the most part, if you see a game playing on the playground, you can join in. So who are the people that we're trying to include and engage? Who are these newcomers that we're hoping to welcome into our community and encourage to play soccer and sort of share a sense of belonging? So whenever I think about this question, the song always comes up. So I thought it might be fitting to play the song for you now. So hopefully it will work as I had practiced. There is a little bit of a quick intro at the beginning, little advertisement.
We can't hear the sound, Malvina, but there is a setting that you should be able to, if you just pause it, there should be a setting that you can choose to allow it to play the sound.
Oh, okay. Oh, share computer sound. Okay. I think this will work now. So that's good. And you missed the advertisement. Okay, let's see. Hopefully it works.
You know, there are a lot of people that we haven't met around the neighborhood yet.
Is it working?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, all good. Let's see if we can meet a few more, all right? Oh, who are the people in your neighborhood? In your neighborhood. In your neighborhood, say, who are the people in your neighborhood? The people that you meet each day.
Excuse me, sir.
Okay, So I believe that song is probably familiar to some of you, but this is always the song when I think about the people in my neighborhood. So I thought it would be a fun way to kind of get into this next segment. Okay, so who are the people in our neighborhood? Who are the newcomers that are coming to Canada? This is often a question I often get from people not knowing the difference between people immigrating or visiting for an extensive amount of time. So we'll just go over this right now. So we have immigrants, and these are people who choose to move to another country. So for whatever reason, they have the ability to decide it's time to leave where they're from and move to somewhere else. These people, people who immigrate, who are immigrants, often have varying backgrounds in terms of what brings them here, whether it's a job, family, the excitement of a new place, or just looking for new opportunities, but they often are able to make this decision and not need much support in order to get here. Then we have people who are refugees, and these people are forced to flee from persecution, and in order for them to apply for refugee status, they have to be located outside of their home country. So that means that another country has offered them refuge while they're waiting to come to the country that they would like to live in, or the country that is accepting them or encouraging them or wanting them to come and live here. Not all refugees that come want to stay and become permanent residents or citizens. They hope that one day they can come back to their country. And most often, because they're forced to leave their country, they don't want to be somewhere else. They do love where they're from, and situations have unfolded that have caused them to flee. Refugees that come here come in many different ways. They have government sponsorship, or sometimes there's family sponsorship. There's also like religious groups that sponsor. There's so many different ways for refugees to make Canada their home. We also have international students living here. So these are people who are paying tuition while they're temporarily studying in Canada. So these are students who can be in high school or in university or college, even some elementary school kids. So this is where their parents or they themselves pay tuition to study and to receive degrees from our universities or colleges or wherever they're studying. And next we have temporary foreign workers. So these are people who are legally allowed to work in a different country. They hold a visa. If they're coming on with families, their families are allowed to legally study in Canada without having to pay tuition. And their visas dictate how long they're able to live here and where they're able to work. And finally, we have permanent residents. And so all these people, immigrants, refugees, international students, temporary foreign workers, have the ability to apply for permanent residency, which eventually leads to citizenship. Now, not everybody who fits into these categories is interested in that, but they do have the option to apply. And depending on their situation, the amount of time it takes to become a permanent resident can vary. Okay, so the first capability that we're going to discuss is CQ Drive and what that entails. So again, just a reminder, CQ Drive is your level of interest, persistence, and confidence during multicultural interactions. Okay, so some tips to have successful multicultural interactions or intercultural interactions is to be as clear and concise as you possibly can when communicating. Be direct. That's often one that people tend to sort of smirk at or laugh at when I present, because as Canadians, culturally speaking, we have a difficult time being direct because we seem to view it as being rude or impolite if you're direct. But actually you can be very kind and assertive at the same time. And if you try it, you'll be surprised with how positive the results may be. Be patient. People process information differently, and that is the same for any personality types, never mind someone who is just learning the language or is new to a language or is perhaps shy with the new language they're hearing and speaking. And finally, be friendly. Approach all of your interactions with a friendly demeanor. Be, you know, a smile goes a long way. There isn't much dialogue required with a smile, but it really has a large impact. And a sustaining one as well. So here are some things that are good to avoid when having intercultural communication. Okay, so we've got slang, jargon, sayings, idioms, phrases, colloquialisms, expressions, and my favorite, mumbo jumbo. These are all part of our wonderful English language, and these need to be avoided as much as possible, not just in verbal communication, but in written communication as well. They confuse people and can make people feel insecure and uncomfortable. People are less likely to engage if they feel embarrassed because they don't understand the double meaning. I have been in Canada for my whole life. I immigrated as a baby, and I didn't grow up in a household with Canadian slang or idioms or expressions. I grew up with different ones, and I'm someone who's been here for a very long time, and I still struggle sometimes to understand what people are saying and what the double meaning is behind things. And I often get embarrassed or frustrated and just don't really want to converse much more after that. So just think about that for someone who's much newer and how much they could struggle when they come face to face with some of these things. And also, like, it's difficult sometimes to realize how often we use these. And so this is kind of a nice exercise to think back when you are conversing to see how much you fall back to these. And then finally, here's something else that is important to avoid as much as possible, is assumption and something that's called common sense. So I learned a long time ago that assuming can get you into trouble, and try my best to avoid it. Sometimes it's a default, but it's important to try and avoid assumptions. And I know that common sense is a saying that gets thrown around a lot, but it carries a negative connotation that often signifies that the other person you're referring to is less than. Like, they don't get you, they don't understand, something's wrong with them, why aren't they doing what they should be doing? In order for different people to truly share a common sense between them, each person has to have had the exact same experience, which is near impossible. It just doesn't really exist. I'll give you a bit of an example of something that, a situation where common sense was thrown out. Years ago in university, my family and I had hosted an international student, and we set him up with bedding and all the necessary items that you would need to sleep comfortably, and just left him there to sleep. And I came to visit him the next day and saw that he was wearing his winter coat. Now, this student had arrived in August, so he was here for university that was starting in September. So I was surprised that he wore a winter coat to sleep. And I know that, like, he came from a warmer climate, but still, August, it wasn't that cold, and also the house is kept warm enough. So I was surprised that he was sleeping with a thick winter coat. But I didn't know him. I didn't want to make him feel uncomfortable, and so I never questioned anything. I just thought, you know what, he's just been here a short time. It's what he needs to adjust. And so life went on, and we got to know each other. And anyway, So fast forward a week, school's begun, and he's still living with us until his accommodations become available on campus. And I come and visit him again in the morning, and he's wearing his winter coat. So this has been a week already. We've hung out, we've gotten to know each other, and he's still wearing his coat. Anyways, what I end up finding out, and here's where the common sense thing comes into play, is that he was sleeping on top of the bedding. All of the bedding. He slept on top of the fitted or the sheet and on top of the blankets. And I was really confused as to why he would do that. And I found out later that he never had blankets to sleep with. He slept on a mat and that was it. So he didn't know that those were things that you had to crawl under to keep you warm. And so I went and I explained to him what each sheet meant and what its purpose was. And it was so interesting to have that experience because I was like, come on, this is common sense. Everybody uses bedding the same way. But no, that wasn't the case. So this is something, simple, something we don't even think about. But I always found it a very profound example of the idea of common sense. One thing though, before I move on from this, is that I will say that this, what's happening now around the world with COVID-19 has given me an example, actually a clear example of how common sense can actually be realized. And almost everyone in the whole world is living as much of a common sense experience as I believe is humanly possible, which is a really profound experience for us all to be having. Okay, so I wanted to do a quick little poll here. I think I tried to figure out how to do polls in this, but I wasn't too certain. So I think maybe what we'll do is we'll just get everybody to share in their in the chat, perhaps what your answer is. So so the Cultural Intelligence Center interviewed 100,000 culturally intelligent professionals from over 100 countries, and they all shared one consistent characteristic. So I'd like to hear what you think the answer was. I'm just gonna pop up the chat so I can see people's answers. Okay, so which characteristic do you think it is? Where they grew up? The number of languages they all spoke? That they were all visible minorities? The number of countries they visited? Or none of the above? So I'll just give you just a couple minutes, like a minute to answer. You got 1, 2. Okay. Well, some of you definitely guessed the right answer. So the answer is
number 3?
No, not number 3. Oops, what is going on? There's like some coloring on my screen. I don't know where that came from. Sorry if I continue to color on my screen. Okay, so the answer is Alice in Wonderland. Does anyone remember? Those of you who grew up with reading Alice in Wonderland books or watching the movie, Alice is all about curiosity. So the answer is number 5, none of the above. That's the one thing they found that everyone shared, was they all shared the genuine interest in other people, in curiosity, in being curiouser and curiouser. So basically, curiosity helps you stay genuine in your search for cultural knowledge. It keeps you interested and impartial when encountering intercultural challenges. Curiosity helps you be confident and agile when problem solving in a cultural context. It's a really important skill to develop. I do a whole presentation on the difference between being curious and being nosy, because that's something that people have a difficult time understanding what the difference is, and how not to take offense when people are genuinely being curious. And one of the big things, one of the big differences between being curious and being nosy is your intentions, and whether or not you lead with the right intentions. So being curious is a really important ability to have, an important skill when you're trying to build new relationships. So if you don't understand something, just ask. Ask, again, lead with positive intention. So create that conversation. Encourage others that you know to be curious. And sometimes what happens is in group settings, there's tends to be one person who seems to know more than the other people about certain cultures or cultural interactions. They tend to become that default person. And this is a really good place where that person can encourage others who normally don't ask the questions, or who normally ask them for all the answers, to go out and ask those questions and find out some knowledge for themselves. So CQ knowledge is our next capability. So it's your understanding of how cultures are similar and different. As you can probably imagine, or you probably guess, this is the place where most people have, have the most strength, the most ability in terms of culture is in knowledge. Lots of people know things, I guess. So let's talk about soccer around the world. So when it comes to structure, think about soccer, how it's organized here. Think about all the steps that are taken to get to the final result of actually playing. In some countries, it's the same as it is here, or perhaps it's even more complex and even more competitive, while in other places, it's easier and more casual. Knowing where to register and how and who is in charge of what can be very confusing and intimidating, even to people whose first language is English but are not from here. It is still a challenge. It can still be a very challenging and intimidating experience. So understanding the time involved in seeking out and finding out the information you need is something that's important to be mindful of, and the complexities that are involved in registering, even for yourself or your children. And even understanding the time involved. For example, if you want to be a volunteer, lots of people don't understand what the time commitment is, and that's also a challenge. We've got the regulations here. We have a lot of rules for our sports, and they're put in place for a reason, and they work, they help, but they can also hinder. They can really be difficult for people who can't understand all the wording and the reasons for it, because where they're from, that wasn't necessary, and they did fine. And that's fair, but it's just not how soccer or other sports are done here. So you think about who can play, what ages are allowed to play, what the way that we divide the ages. What does U stand for when we say that, and what do we mean by it? I know that there is often an explanation for it, but then you have to take that extra step to seek it and know where to find that information. Also, the way we divide, if we're playing more professionally, what areas of the city we live in. I can't even begin to tell you. I volunteer with 2 community associations in the city, and very few people, even ones who've lived here their whole lives, don't know how the city is divided. They're not familiar with what area of the city they live in, and never mind how it's subdivided in soccer culture. And then fees. The cost can be a barrier, even with the supports we have in place. We have some fantastic options for people who can't afford to play sports, and those are great, and we're fortunate to have them. However, it's a very daunting task to have to go through those questions or those reports, the forums. Even for someone who speaks English fluently, it's still a very daunting task. And sometimes it's difficult to find out what you are entitled to. Having to figure out, even just a simple fact that there are fees in place. Fees are definitely something that is more common than not. However, people do come from places where the fees were not visible. They were paid by something else, so you didn't know that there were fees to be paid. So it's something to consider as well. And then there's the whole way of playing here too, with boys teams and girls teams, or boys and girls, or however people self-identify to play. That can also be a bit of a hindrance to some people who are from countries where there are really strict rules with who plays with whom, and not that that's something that we have here, but so perhaps there are ways that we can still respect Canadian culture by including people who have a different view and still want to play. So for example, you know, just having all girls one day, or women play together, or just having opportunities for people to play like that. Or also being mindful that sometimes people come from countries where girls aren't given an opportunity to play organized sports. It's just not something that is seen as important. So that's also something to pay attention to. Then there's uniforms. So access to uniforms may be a huge hindrance for some people. The equipment needed is far less than a sport like hockey or dance, but still can be cumbersome. People don't necessarily know where to shop, or know that there are options to buy things that are more affordable than from stores that sell brand new stuff. And something that is really important is that people want to look the part. And also there are people who expect others to look the part. So there is definitely an expectation and a social pressure there. And something that isn't often addressed or seen as an important thing, but does mean a lot. And then another thing just to consider is turf. Like, fields around the world look different and the same as well. And so turf itself may not be familiar to everyone, and knowing which boots or cleats to wear is not something that everyone necessarily knows and prepares for. I know for myself, my husband is a huge fan of soccer, but sometimes I'm the one who takes the kids when he's not able to, and I make mistakes with what kind of footwear they need for what they're playing. And this is someone who has spent a long time here and is surrounded by a soccer lover. So keep that in mind too. And also, one thing that is really important to remember about soccer is that soccer is life around the world. There are many countries around the world where they live and breathe soccer. It is absolutely everything for them. And often those countries, they don't call it soccer, they call it football or football. And they might come here with a lot of passion and excitement and energy and loud levels of noise that we perhaps maybe aren't as familiar with, but it is life, and it's something that needs to be acknowledged. Cultural knowledge, while it is extremely important, comes with a lot of great attributes. There is something that is a bit dangerous in this capability. So cultural knowledge on its own is not enough. And the reason why, it's because research suggests that cultural knowledge can lead to stereotyping and perpetuating bias, rather than building cultural intelligence. And so that's why it's important to obtain the knowledge, but again, going back to the beginning, is to incorporate the other cultural intelligent capabilities when you're in intercultural settings. So why is this? So when we concentrate too much on what we know about specific cultures, we focus too much on that knowledge and not enough on the individual experience. And remember, we're dealing with individuals, right? We're not dealing with a whole cluster or a whole cultural group at the same time. And so it's important to remember you are dealing with an individual or individuals, and we tend to fit people into a stereotypical mold if we rely heavily on cultural knowledge, rather than try to understand them as the individuals they are. Understanding differences oh, sorry, that was a little mistake. So remember to combine how much you know with how you present that information. Oh, I think I got a little ahead there. Okay, so the next capability is CQ action. So CQ action is your ability to adapt when relating and working in multicultural contexts. Adapting successfully to situations can make all the difference in the outcomes you are trying to achieve. Knowing when, where, and how to adapt is an important skill set to develop. Like all things worth doing, it takes time to learn. So here are some questions that can help you achieve the right mindset when understanding whether or not to adapt. So you think about, in the situation that you're in, are you compromising yourself? So naturally, if you feel a sense of compromising to the point of feeling uncomfortable or aggressive, then this is not the right time to adapt. How can I best express my intentions here? If adapting to the other person involved in the situation is the best way to express your intentions, then this situation is when you should be adapting. I think there is, sorry, a question. Okay. Okay, and then does it mean more to me or them? So for example, if you're greeting somebody in a way like, so this is an example I like to use. Years ago, my husband, he met this an Orthodox Jewish woman, and he knew her husband, so he was very excited to introduce himself to her. And he went up to her and he gave his hand and he wanted to shake it, but then at the same time he was just overcome with emotion, and he went up for a hug and she backed away in a very startling way, and he was immediately offended by it and frustrated and surprised. Anyways, he comes home later and he tells me about the situation, and he starts wondering, like, what's wrong? Like, what's her problem? Why is she reacting that way? And then he was like, I was really friendly. Anyways, what I explained to him was that with some Orthodox women and men, you can't touch someone of the opposite sex. And that's just the way it was. And even after explaining this to him, he still found it offensive. He's like, well, come on, like, I was just being friendly. And then I said to him, that's great, but can you find other ways to be friendly besides hugging somebody or holding or giving your hand to shake your hand? Can you say hi from a distance? Can you say hello? Can you say welcome? And then he realized, yep, he can do all those things. And so he realized that in this situation, while at the time he expected her to adapt to him, he realized that actually this is a situation where he could absolutely adapt to her. And in fact, he did in the future. And they've seen each other many times since then. And another question that is good to think about is, will adapting achieve the desired outcome? So perhaps there might be a bit of a discomfort in this adapting, but at the end of the day, you're able to do it because honestly, the results will be achieved. And that means more to you than the discomfort that you're feeling. And honestly, a little discomfort isn't a bad thing. We learn a lot from feeling uncomfortable, and being in that uncomfortable place can create some incredible results. Okay, so here are some mindful ways to create inclusion. So names. We come across all sorts of names, and it is sometimes extremely stressful for people to know how to say the name and make sure you're not insulting someone when you do so. So this goes back to our curiosity. Ask, 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 ask. Ask how to pronounce. Ask again if you need. Ask again and apologize if you have to do it again. But it's way better to try than not to. It might be appropriate to ask if they have a nickname or another name they prefer to be called. And listen, but listen and watch. That's really important, actually, to pay attention to body language and the tone of voice when people respond to that. Because sometimes people really don't want to offer an alternative, but they feel the pressure to do so. Like people who feel they have to change their name to make it sound more English, or have English speaking people understand them better. So be really mindful of that when you're in those situations, because after all, you're trying to make people feel included. You're not trying to make them fit your mold or your expectation, as you wouldn't want them to make you feel that way either. So never decide for someone what their name should be. Unless you've come to that place where you become really good friends and then you have a nickname that you both agree on and like. Be mindful of language. So people's fluency, their comprehension, their speaking ability, everything is on a spectrum and it varies. Somebody could have very high levels of comprehension, but have low levels of speaking ability. Somebody could be fluent, but very shy. And so there are lots of different things to consider when you are engaging verbally and with someone, or even in written language. Sometimes we get, we have these experiences where we receive emails that are well crafted and worded, beautifully, and then you speak to someone in person and they sound very different, or the opposite. And so keep that in mind as well. And now this is something that COVID has definitely made all of us very hyper aware of, is being mindful of physical contact and space. Now, hopefully it won't change us too much, because the way we communicate with each other, I know here it's very common people to be huggers and to shake hands, and hopefully we'll still be able to come back to that place. But again, we're not talking about COVID specifically, we're talking about just intercultural interactions. And so again, going back to the story with my husband trying to shake hands or hug, think back, people receive their, welcoming experiences differently. There's hugs, there's handshakes, there's waves, there's hellos, there's lots of ways to interact when you first meet somebody. So family dynamics. So that's an interesting one too. Many people are living in multi-generational households, or they have older children that are responsible for taking care of younger children, and therefore aren't able to participate in sports, for example, or do after-school activities because they have to take care of their brothers or sisters. And the family dynamics in terms of multi-generational are also important to remember, because if the grandparents are in charge of their grandchildren while the parents are working, sometimes it limits their abilities to be able to take their grandkids places and to do things with them. And so it's not as easy for them to just pick up and go. And also at times language, it becomes a real struggle in that kind of dynamic. Transportation. So could be limiting. People don't necessarily know how to drive or don't feel comfortable driving to different places, like to stay in their area of comfort, perhaps don't like driving in the winter, so they minimize the amount of driving they do, or they only have one vehicle for the family, or have no access to accessible transportation, or perhaps they haven't found the confidence in learning how to use the buses available. Perhaps there aren't even buses available depending on what community you live in. And another thing that I don't think people often think about is the idea of carpooling and helping someone understand what that concept means, because maybe that's not something that people are aware of or even know that's an option to them. That's a really great way to create inclusivity, is offering people a ride. Just trying to be mindful of the time here. So another one is volunteer culture. This is one of the most incredible things about Saskatchewan and being Saskatchewanian is how we volunteer. It's just who we are, and it's fantastic. We really, it definitely is a big part of us. Something I have learned as an avid volunteer is that volunteering is not something that is done all over the world. There are many more countries around the world that don't volunteer than those that do. And so that's something that we rely on in sports. We rely on volunteer coaches, even volunteer refs or volunteer parents to help organize things. And that's something that lots of cultures aren't familiar with. It's not that they don't necessarily want to do it, it's just that they don't really know where to start. They don't know what commitment is involved. They don't know where to get the criminal record checks, or if they can even get one, or any of those things. And when we're trying to build inclusivity, this is something that we really have to keep in mind, because volunteering is a big aspect of who we are and what sports is about here in Saskatchewan. And finally, be mindful of finances. And this can vary. People choose, we all choose how we spend our money. Even when we say we don't have any, you know, we all have some money, and then we choose how to spend that some money that we have. And just because it looks like people have money to spend doesn't mean they want to spend it, or that they value spending it on sports. So this is something I've noticed being a parent that's involved, is people get frustrated when not everybody chips in for a gift, for a coach, or spends that money on bringing treats to the games, or fundraisers, or even understands how to participate in fundraisers, or what fundraisers are about. So these are really, these are things that are important to be mindful of, and that all can create inclusion. Oh, there's a little technical difficulty here, sorry. I have a little, there's a little, sorry, a little mistake here. Can I, how do I, okay, I have to just, can I pause my screen for a minute? Does that work?
Okay with me.
Oh, it won't let me. Oh, okay, I just need a second. Sorry, everyone, my apologies. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, can everyone see everything now? I just need.
I just got on my screen CQ strategy.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay. All right, so CQ strategy. So your awareness and ability to perform or to plan for multicultural interactions. So CQ strategy is your plan. It's how you use the other capabilities to strengthen and improve your intercultural relationships. Okay, so here are some ideas for engagement. Food. Food, 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 food. Food is, it is everything. Food brings people together, and people love to get together over food. Oh, sorry. I didn't start my video. There we go. Okay, now everyone can see me too. Yes, okay, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, thanks. Okay, so when you are planning any kinds of activities, any kind of get-togethers, try and incorporate food, whether it's snacks that can be shared. And again, I say this while we're living in this COVID world, that hopefully we'll be able to share things again and try and think about food. Oops. Okay, another idea is something I just called skills and drills. Again, I am familiar with soccer, but I'm not a player. So with skills and drills, this sort of idea was have a skills night with stations where people can watch and participate also. So this way, this will involve more than just the kids, more than just their parents. The grandparents can come as well, and they can go around different parts of the building or the field and try out different skills and you know, show off a little bit or teach others. You can do multi-generational learning. Family game night where you can have families play against each other, or you can have parents against kids, grandparents against kids, parents, you know, lots of different variations to include people. And again, this is keeping in mind that you're looking to create a sense of community and a sense of belonging with soccer at the heart of it, right? Think about hosting or planning events at different locations. Often it's difficult for people to make it across town. Even though we live in a smaller province, it's still a distance to get to places. It's not the most accessible of provinces, that's for sure. So consider offering our different locations for your events. Move around the city if possible. Don't play in the same spaces. Think about ways that you can encourage multi-generational playing, include all ages at as many of these social gatherings as possible. Encourage people to come and watch the games and why it might be interesting for them to come as well and to meet other people. Create some sort of a social environment around this. Have some ladies only nights or girls only, or have mothers and daughters playing against each other, or, you know, this is keeping in mind that you're trying to include people who might not feel comfortable playing with boys around or men around, and just trying to encourage different participation, or even people who are comfortable still, you know, mix it up a little bit, have some things like this going on where it's not just, and I'm not talking about how there's women's leagues and stuff. This is something different. This is beyond the league stuff. Music, play music, bring music along, have people perform when they're playing or doing the skills night or like anything. Why not? Like, music is fantastic, and hearing different kinds of music is always a good thing. Sports and language classes. There's so many people who don't know the jargon used in soccer in English, and this is a really great way to include people is by having these sport and language classes. You know, you could even teach a drill and then teach some language around that, or come out into a field and show people what, you know, and bring uniforms, bring up soccer people, like make it interactive, and then people are also being able to build on their confidence by understanding the game in English, and it's fun too. You can learn people can improve their own language skills if you're trying to learn a little bit of Spanish or some Russian, or even just for the fun of it, to learn how to say you know, soccer ball in Urdu or in different languages. And then there's also a singles, something I read about in that report where the newcomers were asked a number of questions where people felt nervous because they did know how to play soccer and play it very well, but they didn't feel comfortable joining a team because they didn't know anybody. And I know that these options are available. However, it takes a bit of encouragement and a bit of outreach to try and get more people involved in this. Another thing people felt was missing in Canada was that you can pretty much join a professional team or a beer league, and that wasn't what they were interested. They wanted something in between, and that's something that we could offer as large or small communities in Saskatchewan. And then finally, combine all these ideas. Why don't you have a big, extravaganza where you have food and music and drills, almost like a soccer fashion show where you can have people show off their skill set and have a great time together and sort of come together over music and food and start building community and friendship in that way. I was reading some articles from this professor, Kelly Harding. She's a professor of psychiatry at Columbia University, and she came about some really groundbreaking discoveries in the work that she does. And I just thought it was really poignant for this time to share this information, is that I'm going to read it out here, but decades of evidence shows that one of the biggest benefits to our health are relationships. So she was talking about how important it is to have a sense of belonging and to be a part of a community and to feel wanted, and how much that does to our health, and how it's the same thing as trying, I don't know, having medicine, I guess, that cures a problem, but this way it's something natural that you can do, and it keeps our brains and our hearts, keeps them strong. Oops, sorry. And then how people are treated on a daily basis is in all aspects of our lives makes a significant difference. She actually even had in her book, I recommend it later, but even attributes it to the difference between like smoking and not smoking. And I didn't include that part in here, but you can read about it in the book. So just a great thing to think about when we're trying to build these relationships, these inclusive and engaging relationships with people who are brand new or relatively new, or have been here for a while, but still feel that newness. So finally, here are some tips for a successful engagement. So remember that everyone is an individual, and that's how we approach this inclusivity and this welcoming attitude, is that these people are individuals. Nobody represents their culture on their own, and that's important to remember. Approach the intercultural engagements with an open mind. Be willing to absorb, be willing to take in new things, be willing to be challenged, be willing to feel uncomfortable, and know that it's okay. Remember to lead with true intentions. This is something that really helps with curiosity. Remember that someone might get offended by what you're saying, but if your intentions are real and true, figure out another way to say it. You can even say like, that's not what I meant, my apologies for, or something like that. But don't stop. Don't stop because someone made you feel like what you said or did was wrong. If you are genuine in your curiosity seeking, then continue to be so. And that's a really important thing, is that genuineness and the true intentions there. And be mindful of your knowledge. Remember, being a know-it-all isn't something that's going to be helpful. But at the same time, it's important to learn and to be proud of what you do know, and to find ways of sharing it or incorporating it into your interactions. And create inclusion by adapting. Remember those questions when you're in situations, and remember that you have the power to help others feel included and engaged. And it might mean you have to change some of the ways that you respond or you act, but it's an important thing to do. Okay, thank you everyone for having me here today and listening and participating with me. And if there are any questions, we can do this. I think through the chat, or you can unmute your mic. And I'm just gonna, oh, sorry, I just want to go back. I have some resources I just wanted to share quickly. Can we go back to my more things before I, oh, am I going twice here? Oh, before the question, sorry. Yeah, is that, can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So, okay, so we have been working on, I'm just getting feedback. Oh, Hugh, I'm going to mute you. I'll put myself on my, yeah, I'll mute. Perfect. Is that better? Yes, that's better. So we have just developed some programs and service. No, I'm still. Eden, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me twice?
No.
I can just hear myself. Okay. Sorry, everyone. Just 1 second.
Chocolate chip cookie dough, strawberry cheesecake.
Okay. Hi. Did you mean to unmute me? I have muted everyone. Okay. Except I was trying to solve my own issues. How about now? I think that's perfect. Okay, so we have developed some programs and services here from the Saskatchewan Soccer Office that we have available. So for example, we have developed a newcomer member strategy. So these are the elements of the newcomer member strategy. So the first is the MAP grant, which is our membership assistance program grant. And that is something that all of our member organizations can apply to. And that is available every year to member organizations. And as an element of that, we have the special project funding grant. And this year, as most years, if member organizations are interested to do a project that engages newcomers or a specific segment of newcomers, then you could apply for MAP grant funding, which this year is due on May 1st, to support your programs in that regard. On an individual level, we also have the Athlete Assistance Program, which is a funding program for athletes who are in our high performance stream. So that helps families who just need some support to ensure that financial barriers are not a challenge for them. And that is something that is available to all members. The next thing, Malvina has been working on a newcomer engagement guide for us to release to our membership. And this engagement guide will have many of the tips and tricks that we included here, that Malvina included throughout this presentation, and I'm sure others. And that will be coming very soon, and then we'll be releasing that widely. So we're very excited for that. Also new, as of new yesterday, we have a brand new, so this is our newcomer member strategy webpage that illustrates everything I'm discussing here. But also we have our brand new newcomer engagement resources webpage that includes lots of resources from different elements in the Canadian sport community sphere,
from webinars to courses to guides to suggestions, some of the reports that Malvina was referring to. And at the bottom includes a list of settlement agencies and open door societies throughout Saskatchewan that you could work with locally in your communities as a resource there. I know that North Soccer in the fall worked with their Southwest Newcomer Welcome Center, and it was extremely successful partnership for them. And they were able to sponsor some of the youth who were interested to play soccer for the indoor season. And they will, I'm sure, be doing that again. So that is definitely a possibility for anyone that's interested as well. Malvina has also completed a website assessment of our brand new website since we've launched it at Christmas to make sure that the things that she's discussing here, language, accessibility, jargon, are not barriers on our website. So she completed that assessment and we'll be working through that, especially in the COVID time, to make sure that our website and materials are as accessible as possible. And then of course, we are here to support, and particularly my role and Nicole when she comes back from maternity leave, we are here to support members who are interested to start newcomer engagement projects in their communities. We can be resources to you, connect you with different options, different resources, connect you with Malvina, give you some ideas based off of what we've seen other members do and have success with. So we're here to support as well. So we are back to the questions. Thank you so much to Malvina for presenting. Does anyone have any questions for her? If you want to type into the chat box, you can. I will monitor that. Or if you raise your hand or unmute yourself, we can just field those one at a time. So Hugh, I think you've got a question.
Oh. Sorry, can I just switch back to the other screen quick? Is that
yes,
okay?
For sure.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, I'm just going to go to just a second here before, sorry. Just, there we go. Just a few resources for people to think about. Oops. Okay. Yes. Oh, what's going on? Can you see me? I can't see anything.
I can see you, but I can't see your screen.
Oh, okay.
So you know what? That's no problem. You could also send that to me
here,
and I can add it to the end of the recording.
Okay, I found it now.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Python currents. Okay, there we go. Okay, yes. I'm ready. Sorry.
Perfect. Hugh, you have a question.
Yeah, just the first one, Lara, would be, is this getting uploaded into our locker? And if so, who will be doing that?
This will not be uploaded into the locker, but I believe that if you were interested to, you could do that self-declaration of PD stuff that you've done on your end.
Okay, that's number one. Number two is, yes, I am a certified facilitator like much yourself. I've done my training in the US with Tennessee Associates, and some of your content was excellent. I'd like to commend you on that. Being on the west side, the Saskatoon, the technical director, I see many of those challenges that you indicated in the format you did, and they are trying times. And I think in the next roll round, whatever we get back to some sort of semblance, I can see that I'm going to have a lot of work in this very field that you've been talking about, the inclusion of the minority groups. And we have already started putting that together for meetings of minority groups, just for information. But yeah, I'm faced with a tremendous amount of those obstacles that are put before me.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Hugh. That is great to hear that you've got some work going on there. And we'd love to hear more about it after. So let's connect on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because yeah, it's quite, you know, we're getting quite involved with Filipino communities and so forth, you know, because we are seeing a lot of those coming into the club. And
Yeah.
challenges,
great.
financial, massive
Yeah.
financial challenges. And so we are just trying to hold on to everything right now and stay in contact with people, because I'm frightened the longer we stay away from these community groups, the further away they're going to get again. It's going to take a lot of work to bring them back into our fold again. But thank you very much for this tonight. It's been very good.
Great. Well, thank you. And absolutely, you're correct. You can't you can't stay away, and need to do whatever you can to listen and to work together to support our community. You know, everyone. I mean, soccer it's interesting. It's so much more than just a sport. It really is, and it's really important to work with that and to encourage people in the community to get involved. And yeah, it's tough with having so many challenges, but it's worth the fight.
Yeah, we're going to see what normality is now when we get back after, well, whatever normality.
That's right.
You know, I just got the footage on TV with BBC, and they're talking about 18 to 24 months before starting up in Britain again with the communities. And that's scary when you're in that sort of number. Scary.
Yeah.
Scary.
It's true.
Incredible. Dan has a question. Will this presentation be sent out or uploaded to the SSA website? Yes. So we have a YouTube channel. You can find us at Sask Soccer on YouTube. And we will also be putting this on our website, and we will be posting it on our social media channels probably next week after Easter, because we have some other stuff going out tomorrow. But for sure, we'll be circulating this because this was a great presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
You can also email us if you have anything that you didn't want to ask today or it comes to you later.
Perfect. Well,
Okay.
Malvina, it doesn't
Great.
sound like we have any other questions. So thank you so much for
Thank
sharing
you.
your expertise and your experiences, your examples. Greatly appreciated. Thank you to everyone for attending. I'm very excited about the attendance we had tonight, especially with Cristiano Ronaldo in the house. And as said, we will.
Yeah, he's my favorite.
Cristiano says relationships keeps our brains and hearts strong. That's true. We will post this next week. If you have any other questions, contact Malvina or I. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And have a great night.
Thanks, everyone. Stay healthy, stay positive. Thanks. Oops.